what does that mean to you, and how do you make that risk a responsible risk? How do you make sure that there's some safety net in place when you take that risk? And how do you make sure, at least certainly in your mind, that you're committed to that risk? So I could tell you any number of stories out of my life where I've taken risks and I've not been successful. But when I fell, first I got back up, and second I didn't stay on the ground, and I learned something from it. So I didn't fall that second time from that same risk. And so the learning experiences we have make it important for us to not be so risk averse. You can't wait on UCLA to take care of you. You've got to own that, and you've got to have a plan. And in building that plan, and I'll just tell you, again, in my own career life here, that plan has involved having a number of mentors that have given me critical advice at critical moments. And there are still people that I touch base with on a regular basis because I still value and respect those perspectives. Doesn't mean that we always agree, because I think there's a point in that relationship where you have to push back. You have to disagree because you've got to own it and you've got to make some decisions on your own. But there are other times when that perspective can be really valuable. Even the questions, does that really make sense, Keith? That's a good question to be able to answer. Have you thought this through, Keith? You sort of say, yeah, maybe I need to think about this a little bit more. I mean, those are simple questions that I know my mentors have asked me, and I've either had good full answers for them or I haven't had good full answers for them. And I did have to go back and reconsider. And at that time, that was probably helpful. There are other times when I said, I'm going forward. And in terms of going forward, I'm committing myself to a successful outcome, whatever that is. But I understand what I'm doing and what the cost of it will be. Everything we do has a cost. Everything we do hopefully has a benefit. And so when you burn a bridge, know that you've burned a bridge. Don't think you can go back across that. When you've made a friend, be a friend. Don't make it a one-way street. And so you have to, I think, sometimes expand the conversation, because when we only have a conversation with ourselves, we always agree because we're always right. The support piece of your gap analysis, do you have the support? And that can be colleagues, that can be family, that can be certainly people in the profession, and people that you consider mentors. So let me just stop there and cover.
Great bosses along the way. So how has that experience been for you in terms of how you
I've had very good bosses. I've had a couple bad bosses, and I think sometimes you learn as much from the bad bosses as you do from the good ones. Because certainly from some of the bad ones, you learn what not to do. Some of you out there, I know I've probably heard this story about, so I apologize for telling it again. But when I was in affirmative action, I had a client department that I had to work with. And the ABC for that department was someone who enjoyed doing black dialect. Okay. He was, and this is back in the 80s, he was very hip. He was very, I'm not even sure what I call it, right? Well, he didn't do it well. And he didn't need to do that with me. And so I had a conversation with him, and I said, I don't do Yiddish dialogue with you. You don't need to do black dialogue with me. We can work together without that. That might be okay with some other folks, but that's just not going to work well with me. So we have that conversation. That's probably like 1983, 84. 1993, he and I are peers. We're on the same management team. 1995, he's my boss. Now, I think about, what if I had not had that conversation, right? What if I'd been in a place where I had to either put up with it or be pissed off and be angry black man with him. All right, not a good career choice. And I think there was an insensitivity on his part that because that worked with some people, doesn't gonna work with all of us. Well, it just wasn't. And so I think the lesson in that I sort of learned is, you know, not only that you deal with people as individuals, but you have to think about what is the impact of your actions upon others. Because you're going to see us, we're going to see each other again. And I never had to bite my tongue, and he never did that with me. He did. I think, you know, that was important. An example of one of my good bosses I had. When I came over to government relations, I don't know, many of you might remember Mike Eicher. Mike was our vice chancellor. And I was in affirmative action and in a joint appointment in administration. And Mike asked me to come over and be the acting ABC at that point for government community relations. And I told him no. I said, I'm busy, I got 2 other jobs, can't possibly do that. I got a call from Pete Blackman, who was the administrative vice chancellor. Pete said, Keith, maybe you didn't understand the question. Mike needs our help and we're gonna help him. I said, Pete, you're right. I didn't understand the question. We're going to help Mike. Well, Mike was the kind of boss who, even though I said no to him initially, was always supportive, always gave me space and gave me whatever support I needed. And each time after Mike left UCLA, he went to Johns Hopkins, tried to recruit me at Johns Hopkins. Now he's at Ohio State, tried to recruit me at Ohio State. And I'm not going to any of those places because I don't want to be cold. I've spent that time already. But it talks about the relationship that Mike and I had. And if Mike came back to a warm place, maybe we could have the conversation. But it was a supportive relationship. I think that kind of role model is important in your career development, having that. But also there are lessons you learn from the bad boss. You learn what you're not going to do, and you surviving it can make you stronger. But I never tell people to stay in an uncomfortable situation. If I had not had that conversation, that situation would have been unbearable. I would have left.
Bad bosses is rotating, because you probably learn a lot more from a bad boss.
Yeah.
You learn about yourself. You learn what you will never do to another human being, whether you work with them or not. And it really does make you stronger.
And you know, it also, what you want to have is the self-confidence. The self-confidence that this person or this unit doesn't only control me. Too often, we give other people more power than they ask for or deserve. And I always say, you got to take that power back because you gave it to them. You gave them that power over them. So when I was 20 something, 24, 25, I remember being in a difficult situation at work, and I'm tossing and turning at night because the argument is still going on in my head. And I'm thinking about what I could have said, what I should have said, what I'm going to say next time. And I realized that while I'm doing all of that, that other person is snoring. They're just sleeping, you know. And I had to say to myself, I've given them more power than they've asked for or deserve. I've got to take that power. You know? And so I think you learn about yourself, and you want to build, again, the kind of self-confidence that you know that your skill set is viable in any number of places, and that you can find, you know, professional and personal fulfillment in any number of other places. And so those are things that as you go through your career growth, I think those are the things that you continue to build. I talk about a body of work. That as you build your body of work, when you're hit with something that's new or something that's different, or even difficult even, because you've got a body of work, it's not new to you. You've seen it before. You know how to respond or adapt to it. You know not only what it means, but you know what it doesn't mean. And when you have that body of work, it makes those kinds of issues, you know, less insurmountable. They're much more manageable. And you always want to be able to manage the issues. Now, some things you can't. Let those go. Don't get stuck. You want to keep going forward. And so there are some, again, we all notice, there are some issues that you're just not going to be able to resolve to your satisfaction. And you can stay stuck on that, or you can move past that. But recognize at some point, I've done what I can do with this one. I got to let it go now. Because if I'm continuing the argument in my head, I'm the one not sleeping. I'm the one not being productive. I'm the one that's stuck. And I never wanted to be stuck. I wanted to move forward.
Say you're like the best person in your department. You are the go-to person. Everyone recognizes you. However, your manager knows it, but won't toot your horn as loud as it should be too. So in that situation, you want to get out of there, and you start taking not such calculated risks. You're just trying to go to get out of that situation into another department where your reasoning for trying to go from one place to another is lost only because of the situation that you're under, very much like you were just sharing. Now, what would be the cool-headed area?
Don't be 23 like I was. I think you have to look at a range of responses. One of the responses, and again, it depends on the level of rapport that you have with that supervisor. If I am valued and I'm productive, then that supervisor may not want me to go.
Yes.
Because that supervisor has a problem now, they got a hold of it. And they'd rather not have to think about that because they know you're taking care of it. And so if that's a part of this scenario, then I think you've got to approach that supervisor and have some honest conversation about, you know what, I'm ready for the next step in my career. And if that next step isn't here, then I'm going to need support and help to find that next step because I'm committed to the institution. It's very hard for a supervisor to turn to you and then say, no, I'm going to keep you right where you are. Okay? Now, that person may or may not be helpful, but it's hard for that person to say, no, I'm going to keep you where you are. Okay? Second set of things, it's an antagonistic relationship where you've been butting heads with that person over a period of time, and you do feel that that person is not going to be helpful. And so that kind of conversation may not be a conversation that's going to be successful for you. I think in that scenario, then you do have to do whatever you can because that situation is going to become even more unbearable. And you're going to have ultimately some kind of HR disciplinary problems.